Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Thursday, August 24th, 2023. My name is Emma Vigeland in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Richard Wiles, president of the Center for Climate Integrity, on the possibility of Biden's DOJ suing oil companies. And later in the show, Eleni Schirmer of the Debt Collective will be with us to discuss the state of student debt relief 1 year since Biden first attempted to cancel it more broadly. Meanwhile, the first Republican debate sans Trump was last night. Hope you tuned into our coverage. DeSantis was quiet, Vivek was out the trail, Chris Christie looked weak as hell.
Cackling Vivek, they call him.
He's got to work on that one. Giuliani, Sidney Powell, Eastman, and the other coup plotters were booked and mugshotted yesterday in Georgia. And Trump is today. And in that Georgia case, Trump is switching lawyers, so things are going great. It's all but confirmed. Wagner Group leader Prigozhin, who tried to seize power from Putin 2 months ago, presumed dead after his plane fell from the sky. Fed officials set to meet at their annual conference, and despite inflation being down significantly, more rate hikes could be on the table because Powell sucks. Biden set to announce the 10 drugs selected for drug negotiations, direct negotiations between Medicare and pharma companies, which would drastically lower their costs. The South Carolina Supreme Court upholds the state's near total abortion ban. The Florida Board of Education approves new anti-trans bathroom rules that would apply to colleges that get taxpayer money as well. Apple caves and endorses right to repair legislation in California, meaning their monopoly over repair could be broken. The DOJ is cracking down on stolen COVID relief funds. 3,100 have been charged. More than 350 wildfires have broken out in Greece in the past 5 days. And lastly, breaking news, the DOJ is suing SpaceX over discriminating against refugees and asylum seekers in their hiring processes. All this and more on today's Majority Report. I just saw an IM that I loved. Aaron is not cool says, can we get some applause emojis in the chat for Emma this week? Hosting the GOP debate stream last night in a final boss fight with her landlord, making her best friend bride weep, hosting this week in Sam's absence, all while being unable to open doors in her home. We'll see her out the trail, you know? I love that. I made some progress, though. The AC, at least, even though the floors are messed up, AC, we have some progress on that front. But hope you guys tuned into our late night coverage. I mean, starting the debate at 9 p.m. is slightly cruel, but we had a great time. And Sam, I didn't think he was going to end up joining, but he hopped on for a little. We had some fun. So thanks to everybody for tuning in. Let's just start talking about this right off the bat here. The debate last night had a very bizarre vibe, as Sam observed. None of the candidates really went after DeSantis at all. They went after the guy in third right now, Vivek. And that would make sense based on past track records of these kinds of things if DeSantis were the front runner. But he's not. It's Trump, the guy who wasn't there. it's it's almost, this has happened before. Remember the Democratic debates, how no one really went after Biden enough, and it ended up being Warren and Bernie going at it, and Tulsi versus Kamala, the lower tier candidates eating each other up. And that was somewhat reflective in this debate, but the problem is that DeSantis isn't the number one guy. He's like 30 to 40 points behind the number one guy. And they were all afraid to take on Trump. We'll talk about this later in the show, but the only candidate on that stage out of 8 who did not raise their hand to say they would support Trump as the nominee even if he were convicted was Asa Hutchinson. Chris Christie, for all his tough talk, tried to play it off that he was, just raising his hand to get in the conversation. It was a bizarre, weak move. So at the very least, the best case scenario for him is that his answer on that is muddled. And there were just some other things like, DeSantis seemed entirely ornamental. He abandoned wokeness. I don't even think he said the word woke once because it's not testing well with Republicans anymore. And so that's the kind of slimy guy that he is. And I think that comes through. On Ukraine, Vivek was going hard against funding it. Then the more establishment Republicans like Nikki Haley, they were going at each other on that.
It's important to also add that the funding of Ukraine was a missed opportunity to both agitate against China by invading Mexico, basically.
Yes, right. I almost memory hold that. And there also was some really concerning stuff on abortion, like the Christian theocrats, Mike Pence, Asa Hutchinson, waxing poetically about a federal abortion ban. DeSantis and Tim Scott danced around it. So lots of scary stuff. But the reality of that sideshow was that the guy who was the presumptive nominee by every polling metric was not there. And it doesn't seem like any amount of legal trouble is going to change that from an electoral perspective. He was instead on X with Tucker. Tucker Carlson has a show on Twitter, known television or streaming medium. I thought they abandoned the Periscope thing, but Elon Musk's like, let's bring that back. This time, Tucker sat down with Donald Trump, pre-recorded interview, and they aired it. Tucker was giving a middle finger to Fox for firing him, and Trump was giving a middle finger to the rest of the Republican nominees by airing this in the middle of the debate. And this is how the interview ended. Tucker is asking Trump here if he thinks that the country is headed towards a civil war. Oh boy.
Legally.
Do you think we're moving towards civil war?
There's tremendous passion and there's tremendous love. January 6th was a very interesting day because they don't report it properly. I believe it was the largest crowd I've ever spoken before. And some of the crowds I've spoken before. And like July 4th on the mall.
Oh my God, the crowd size thing.
I think they had 1 million people there. But I think that the biggest crowd I've ever spoken before was on January 6th. And people that were in that crowd, a very, very small group of people. And we said patriotically and peacefully and patriotically, right? Nobody ever says that. Go peacefully and patriotically. But people that were in that crowd that day, very small group of people went down there. And then there are a lot of scenarios that we can talk about. But people in that crowd said it was the most beautiful day they've ever experienced. There was love in that crowd. There was love and unity.
Can you pause it for a sec? So I'm wondering how he even launched into January 6th, because Tucker just asked him, are we headed towards civil war? And that would be fine if he wanted to make that pivot. But you're currently under a big microscope by federal prosecutor and the special counsel Jack Smith because of your actions in part on January 6th and the coup attempt and plotting that led up to that point. And tomorrow, buddy, you're going down to Georgia to get fingerprinted and mugshotted for your actions related to the election. So his desire to talk about this I mean, he really can't help himself. He cannot help himself, and his lack of discipline is such a gift to prosecutors. But let's keep going.
People in that crowd said it was the most beautiful day they've ever experienced. There was love in that crowd. There was love and unity. I have never seen such spirit and such passion and such love. And I've also never seen simultaneously and from the same people such hatred of what they've done to our country.
So do you think it's possible that there's open conflict? We seem to be moving towards something.
I don't know, because I don't know what it, I can say this. There's a level of passion that I've never seen. There's a level of hatred that I've never seen, and that's probably a bad combination.
Donald Trump, thank you.
Thank you very
much. Wow. It sounds like he's talking about, the New York Giants fan club relative to the Philadelphia Eagles one or something. I mean, there's a lot of love there and a lot of passion, but a lot of hatred for the Eagles.
Donald Trump, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
More hate than ever. His dad was detained at a KKK rally.
Yeah.
Speaking of
We're not
passion and
going
hatred.
to have a civil war. There's not like a split that could easily happen, like happened in our Civil War between like the North and South, like the plantation economies of the South and the Northern industrial.
Don't tell that to Tim Pool.
Like at the very most, we're going to have these stochastic events of violence, but like an actual civil war between, I don't see it.
I mean, but did you see the passion on that day? Did you see the love? They're very passionate about their hatred, and they love overturning the democratic results of an election. It's Orwellian's overused, but war is peace, freedom, slavery. I guess hate is love now. It's just the guy is a lunatic of the highest order, and he's dangerous. But we'll play more of Trump when we get to other parts of the interview, including the question about Jeffrey Epstein in the fun half. But first, a word from one of our sponsors, Rhone. Rhone is honestly an amazing investment in your closet. It's really difficult to find pieces that you can wear to the workplace that aren't wrinkled or that are, they tend to be uncomfortable, some of those more traditional fabrics, but Rhone is not that. Men's closets were due for a radical reinvention, and Rhone stepped up to the challenge. Rhone's commuter collection is the most comfortable, breathable, and flexible set of products known to man, and here's why. Rhone helps you get ready for any occasion with the commuter collection, which offers the world's most comfortable pants, dress shirts, quarter zips, and polos. You never have to worry about what to wear when you have the Rhone commuter collection. Rhone's comfortable four-way stretch fabric provides breathability and flexibility that leaves you free to enjoy what life throws your way, from your commute to work to your 18 holes of golf. It's time to feel confident without the hassle. With Rhone's wrinkle release technology, wrinkles disappear as you stretch and wear the products. It's that easy. I've got to say, I have firsthand knowledge of this. My boyfriend has a Rhone button down. It looks very fancy, but then when you feel it, you're like, oh my gosh, that's the most comfortable stuff. It feels like athleisure, but it does not look like it. And dry cleaning is a pain. It's a pain and it's costly. So if you need, to dress up a little bit, this is really the perfect solution, and it's an investment in yourself. With Gold Fusion anti-odor technology, you'll be smelling fresh and clean all day long. On top of that, Rhone is 100% machine washable, so you can ditch the dry cleaner altogether. As I mentioned, yes, my boyfriend has the button down. It's very helpful, and we can get around the dry cleaning, as I mentioned, which I can't stand. All that plastic, and you got to pick it up. It's a pain. The commuter collection can get you through any workday and straight into whatever comes next. Head to Rhone, RHONE.com/Majority Report and use the promo code Majority Report to save 20% off your entire order. Again, that's Rhone, RHONE.com/Majority Report. Use the promo code Majority Report to save 20% off your entire order. 20% when you head to Rhone.com/Majority Report. It's time to find your corner office comfort. All right, guys, quick break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Richard Wiles.
Thank you, Emma. Sponsor for today's program, GiveWell. I've talked about GiveWell many times in the past. When you donate money to a charity, a lot of times you're going to wonder, how much impact is my dollars actually making? It's hard to find out information, hard to know like which charities are spending what on what, and are what they doing effective. But if you're interested in having in giving money to a charity, and you want to know what is creating the most meaningful difference for some of the poorest people in the world, check out GiveWell. They have research, evidence-backed, high-impact giving opportunities, and they share their work for everyone for free. GiveWell has spent over 15 years researching charitable organizations. They only recommend a few of the highest impact opportunities they found. Over 100,000 donors have used GiveWell to donate more than $1 billion. Rigorous evidence suggests that these donations will save over 150,000 lives and improve the lives of millions more. GiveWell wants as many donors as possible to make informed decisions about high-impact giving. You can find all of their research and recommendations on their site. It is totally free. You can make a tax-deductible donation to their recommended funds or organizations in GiveWell, and GiveWell does not take a cut. There's all sorts of things that are on their top list. Bed nets to prevent malaria. $5 can provide one net. Nets can reduce the number of malaria infections. Enough nets and a large drop in infections can save a life in expectation. Preventative medication for malaria costs about $7 to provide a child with malaria treatment through high malarial season. These treatments reduce the amount of malaria infections, and with enough treatments, also save a life in expectation. Vitamin A supplements, it costs about $1 a day. It costs about $1, I should say, to deliver vitamin A supplement to a child. Vitamin A deficiency can increase mortality rates. Vitamin A distributions can save a life by reducing vitamin A deficiency. Cash incentives for things like routine childhood vaccines cost about $160 to vaccinate an infant. This funding provides cash transfers to incentivize caregivers to bring in babies to clinics for routine childhood vaccinations. I found Give directly through GiveWell, no relation. We've donated thousands via the show to Give directly. They give great recommendations over at GiveWell. You can find exactly how much of the money is going to the charity and what impact it has. Go to givewell.org to find out more or make a donation. And if you make a donation, let them know you heard about it by choosing podcast when they ask you, how did you hear about us? And enter the Majority Report, Sam Seder, at checkout. Again, that's givewell.org. And let them know that we sent you by choosing podcast and Majority Report. Givewell.org. Now back to the show.
We are back, and we are joined now by Richard Wiles, president of the Center for Climate Integrity. Richard, thanks so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So your group is spearheading some efforts to hold big oil accountable for the effects of climate change through litigation, which is, I think, a really promising avenue, especially because, and we'll get into this, Senate progressives agree with you. But just tell us a bit more about your work in this space and why you feel this is a viable path forward.
Yeah, if you look through history, you'll see that no giant social problems like climate change have ever been solved without a litigation strategy. The climate movement tried for decades to, solve climate change through the Congress. They failed there. Now, the courts are not a place where you're going to solve climate change, but there are some things you can do through the courts that are really important. And the main one, we think, is to hold them accountable for their lying, right? The companies knew 40 or 50 years ago, maybe even 60, that their products would cause climate change. They called it catastrophic themselves. And then they ran the most consequential disinformation campaign in the history of humanity that put us in the situation we're in today. So we think that at a minimum, we need to engage the courts to hold the companies accountable for that. And that would mean that they should pay for the damages that were caused by their products, which they knew 40 years ago would cause those damages. And that could be anything from just sea level rise to, the catastrophic impacts of something like Hurricane Maria. So they need to pay up basically and be held accountable for that. And you can only do that through the courts.
And I mean, this is a very similar tactic to the DOJ under Clinton and Bush successfully suing Big Tobacco. So there's precedent for this.
Yeah, there is. And also all the state cases that were brought, the 40 some odd attorneys general that sued both the tobacco companies and the opioid companies is a really good example of this. Companies that lie about their product, they know it's going to kill people, just like the fossil fuel guys did. And then they were ultimately held financially accountable for that.
Right. So can you talk about how it got to the point where I guess it was on a few weeks ago at the end of July, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Markey, and Merkley, who are definitely, I think, considered the four most progressive senators, they wrote a letter to Merrick Garland asking if for him to go after Exxon and Shell and other big oil companies. Your take on that effort by Senate progressives?
Well, that's not the first time these letters have gone over to DOJ. That's the first thing to know. This is a sort of a one in a long series of letters and requests to the department to basically do what the department did to tobacco, as you said, file a racketeering case, against the industry, because it's clear that the industry orchestrated what is called, I guess we all know this now because of Trump, a corrupt enterprise that, for decades, spread disinformation about climate change and undermined the country's ability to deal with it. So what the senators and members of the House are requesting is that the DOJ take a similar action as they did with tobacco against big oil. The cases that have been filed to date, I should say, there's several that have racketeering claims in them, right? So there's a little bit of a precedent out there, if you will, where in New Jersey and in Puerto Rico, there have been racketeering cases filed. And what the members of Congress are saying is like, look, the DOJ is the most powerful law firm in the world, right? The largest law firm in the world. You'd be bringing the power of the federal government to bear against the companies here in what they feel and what we feel, is a pretty strong case that the companies engaged in a racketeering enterprise, to deceive the public about what their products would do and all the disasters that we see unfolding pretty much on a daily basis now.
Well, in the wake of what's happening in Maui, this would be an action that would make absolute sense. You mentioned that this is not the first time that this kind of letter has been written. Bernie Sanders and Ted Lieu, I believe, sent a similar letter to Loretta Lynch at the end of Obama's second term, trying to get them to look into big oil in this way. But if you could expand on some of those efforts by states and municipalities to sue big oil for the consequences of their actions and their cover-up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think right now you've got 8 attorneys general and about 36 municipalities that have brought cases against big oil, basically saying they knew that their products would cause climate change, and then they lied about it. And so they've got to pay for the damage, right? They've got to pay for the adaptation costs that all these cities and states are going to have to bear as they attempt to survive climate change. The attorney general's cases tend to focus on the lying. They're more traditional fraud cases under consumer protection laws. The municipal cases tend to focus on the damages. In other words, look, we got to build seawalls and cooling centers. We got to expand the storm drainage. We got to move the sewage treatment plant. We got to protect our drinking water. We have this endless list of costs that we have. And we didn't cause this problem. You did, because you knew your products would do this 50 years ago. We didn't. Then you thrust this damage on us, and you need to pay to help us pay your fair share, if you will, to help us pay for these adaptations. And the thing about that is, and the reason the companies fear these cases so much is because if you think about the costs here, we're well into the trillions of dollars. I mean, if they were held accountable for their fair share of all the adaptation costs for every municipality and state in the country, this is an existential threat to them, and they know it. So, I mean, it's not only is it important morally, it's also, I think, in terms of, moving the nation forward, at least to get to the point where we can survive climate change. This is absolutely necessary because cities can't afford these costs. There's no way. There's just no way. If the oil companies aren't held accountable, a lot of these adaptation measures just won't happen.
What would be then the benefit of the federal government taking a RICO, a stance, bringing RICO charges versus fraud?
Right. So the thing that the Department of Justice can do that nobody else can do, first of all, they're not bound by a statute of limitations. So they can build a case that goes all the way back to the 1970s and 80s when the first evidence we have of the company's prior knowledge and initial deception has surfaced. So they can use the entire body of evidence to make their case. Now, they're not under federal RICO law. They can't get giant punitive damages or a multi-trillion-dollar damage award. They cannot do that. But what they can do is force the companies to tell the truth. Right? They could force the companies to issue statements broadly, very widely every time they ran an ad, for example, that said there is no climate safe fossil fuel, for example, or they could, be forced to say that carbon capture, which is their latest fraud, is no substitute for emissions reductions, or they could be forced to say that natural gas is not a climate safe fuel. There's a whole number of corrective statements that they could be forced to make, and essentially be forced to tell the truth, at a very wide scale, which would completely undermine their current ongoing greenwashing and general bullshit that they put out there about how they're, trying to solve the problem. They would be exposed as the cause of the problem and as perpetuating that through the lies that they've been telling. And I think that, were the Department of Justice to achieve those corrective statements, it would be a total game changer because all of the garbage that the companies put out there about how they're trying to solve the problem would be exposed for just exactly what it is.
Biden might have some explaining to do for his funding of 2 carbon capture projects and 2 carbon capture projects and 2 more on the way.
Right. Well, I think, if DOJ filed this case, he'd have a pretty good claim to taking a very aggressive position against big oil. Not that the White House would be the ones that did it, but his administration would certainly, probably pick up a few points with people who care about climate if they delivered such an action.
Yeah, and I mean, we covered last night the Republican debate, and every single answer on climate change was an absolute just disgusting disaster about burning more coal, burning more oil. I mean, they revel in it. So that's not to say that a Republican would be any better by any stretch of the imagination, of course, but it is just something to note that, like, I would say that the Biden administration has been a little bit two steps forward, 1 step back in this degree when it comes to greenlighting certain projects. Yes, the electric vehicle stuff is great, but this would be a stance that is appropriately aggressive, given or a step that is appropriately aggressive, given the scope of the problem that we're facing and that we're experiencing. And we have been for years, but very acutely this summer. I think more Americans are starting to understand what our future looks like.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, let's be clear that the administration has, let's just say, been all over the place on climate, right? So they do some good things. They do some things that, that are just plain, bad. But this action would, I think, go a long way to undermining the industry in a fundamental way if they were forced to tell the truth. Man, I just can't emphasize how important it is for the industry to be able to continue to lie and, gaslight the world about what they're doing. Their net zero commitments, which are complete BS, right? And everything else they say, carbon capture, all of that. It just needs to be exposed for what it is, and not just by, environmentalists or, people like me and you. If it's coming from the DOJ and it's coming from the oil companies, okay, if they're forced to say it, that's the game changer. So, I mean, that's the kind of pressure that this kind of litigation can put on the companies. And you really can't achieve that kind of result through any other means. There's the Congress is never going to do that. Right?
Yes.
You can see that with opioids and tobacco. So the only way to get the truth out there would be through action by the Department of Justice.
Well, because, we will, we will both speak on the show about what's realistic, and your path is more realistic, and what would be ideal, which would be, in my opinion, nationalizing these companies and phasing them out systemically with the government involvement. But of course, given how much money is sloshing around in Congress and the filibuster in the Senate, that's just not a very likely path, even though that is an action that would meet the scope of what we're facing. Go ahead.
So let's, I think the other thing we haven't talked about is the narrative value of these cases, right?
Yeah.
That's not why anyone would bring the case. That's not why these communities are bringing the case. They're not bringing the case so that, members of Congress talk differently about it. But it's just a true fact, if you look at it, that, when the Sackler name came off the art museum, right, that was a big blow for them, right? The reputational damage to the pharmaceutical companies that produce the opioids has, been devastating. And the same with tobacco. Nobody's looking to the tobacco industries for healthcare advice. It's just their reputation, is in the garbage can, right? And so I think that's an important outcome, a corollary benefit, if you will, of these cases, is that they establish for once and for all that these companies knew and lied about climate change, and they don't give a damn what happens. Obviously, they're increasing production. They obviously don't care if climate change accelerates, and they'll continue to lie about it and lie about their commitments to the solutions until somehow they're forced to change that. But when all that happens, I think it's safe to say that their political capital will be significantly diminished, right? If they're paying trillions of dollars in damages and they're exposed for the liars that they are, it's just a lot harder for them to block action in the Congress, right? That's just the fact of it. Now, that's not why anybody's bringing the cases. That's just something that I think the cases can provide. They give legitimacy through documents that come from the industry themselves, right? Documents from inside the companies where they're saying the things I'm saying. They're predicting catastrophe 40 years ago. They're choreographing the disinformation campaign. So when that becomes sort of common knowledge, I think that just changes the entire zeitgeist about, the power balance moving forward as we try to solve climate change, which again, won't happen through the courts, but the courts can help.
Before I let you go, I'm wondering if you could give some of those egregious examples you've touched on, the internal scientists at some of companies like ExxonMobil, knowing exactly what the outcome of burning all these fossil fuels is, and yet the public statements being so different from these companies. If you don't mind fleshing out exactly what that looked like and what some of the publicly available knowledge is on that front.
Well, one thing is the Exxon team back in the 70s and early 80s was probably the best climate science team in the world. They accurately predicted exactly the temperature rise that we see today, like 1.1 C. That's exactly what they predicted. They exactly predicted the level of CO2 in the atmosphere. And I mean like to the part per million level, right? They were the best. And then they looked at that and said, this is going to produce, quote, this is their words, catastrophic outcomes, right? For a significant fraction of the world population. And they mentioned catastrophic outcomes in relation to agriculture, in relation to all sorts of impacts and sectors of the economy. So that's Exxon predicting catastrophe multiple times and then orchestrating the denial campaign. Shell, I think they have one of my favorite statements, which is after looking at various different scenarios of emissions, and particularly the one that we've been on since they did this in the 1980s, which is just business as usual, they predicted that civilization itself could prove a fragile thing. So that's pretty amazing to me. They're predicting that civilization itself might collapse, but then they're like, what the hell? Let's just get into this denial campaign and we'll just lie about it for the next 40 years. It's just outrageous.
The amount of cognitive dissonance that you have to possess about you raking in a bunch of cash and what you're going to create for your kids. I guess they probably think that, like all of these very wealthy people think that they can build their own compound and that they'll be insulated from the effects that they've created on the planet. But I really can't think of anything more morally repugnant, to be honest.
100% agree with you. And the thing is, the CEOs and the people making the decisions, they know. They know what they're doing. They know that the products are causing this problem, and they just don't care. They don't care how many people die. They don't care how much it costs. They obviously don't care about anything, because if they did, they'd be doing very different things than what they're doing now.
Well, really appreciate your time today, Richard. How can people support efforts to bring litigation or pressure the Biden administration to take this action?
That's a great question. I don't have a great answer for that. I wish I did. The decisions to file lawsuits across the country, that's one thing that you can support locally. Let's just say that if you're in a red state, your attorney general is not going to bring this case. But if you're in a blue state, that's possible. You just got to support the politicians at the local and state level that are bringing these cases. And, I don't know that there's any way for the citizens to apply pressure to DOJ. I don't think that's a thing that the DOJ really responds well to. And, it's not something that is typically done. People got to just keep the heat on the administration and Biden to let's not have any more willows, and let's take a step forward here and do some real stuff.
Richard Wiles, president of the Center for Climate Integrity. Thanks so much for your time today.
Oh, thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
All right, guys, quick break. And when we come back, we'll be talking about student debt. It's been 1 year since Biden announced cancellation. We are back, and we are joined now by Eleni Schirmer, writer and organizer with the Debt Collective. Eleni, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, we've had Astra Taylor on a bunch of times on the show, and it's a never-ending struggle here to get rid of student debt. It's been 1 year. It's the 1 year anniversary of Biden announcing that initial debt relief, 10 to 20,000 for people below the income threshold that was set, and I guess the additional 10,000 is the Pell Grant forgiveness, and then the Supreme Court struck it down. So, where are we, as an organizer with the Debt Collective? If you could just bring our audience up to speed about where we are at today.
Well, I think the big thing that we've learned over the last year is that there's a way to cancel debt that cancels debt, and there's a way to cancel debt that creates opportunities for lawsuits, that generates complex bureaucratic applications, chances for the people that need relief the most to get left behind, opportunities for loan servicers to fumble the ball and drop it. And that is, we're at this moment right now. Is the president, we've seen very clearly in the last year since Biden's announcement to cancel debt, a lot of folks in the Debt Collective and activists and organizers calling for debt relief were really disappointed when the president set up the initial program instead of automatically canceling debt and then going on national TV and saying, folks, I canceled your debt. He got on national TV and said, guys, I think I have a plan. I think I'm going to cancel your debt. And you'll just have to fill out some paperwork and then it'll be all set in stone. What happened is that there was a 6-week delay between Biden's initial announcement of his intention to cancel debt and his unrolling of the application. In that time, 6 different right-wing lawsuits were filed to challenge the legality of the program. Got a national injunction was upheld by the lower courts, and then just earlier this summer, sustained by the Supreme Court, blocking the effort. And what we see is that in other attempts since that time, Biden has actually discharged debt for almost 1 million people who have been in debt, student debt for more than 20 years, have had their balances totally zeroed out. And that's a curious thing. How was Biden able to do this, even though the Supreme Court struck down relief? And part of the reason why that worked is because the people that have had their debt canceled didn't have to apply for it. There wasn't a complex means testing to determine who was and wasn't eligible. It was automatically and totally canceled. And that's the way that we know that canceling debt actually works. The Biden administration is currently sort of doing a big press release around its revisions to the income-driven repayment program, which is an opportunity for borrowers to pay loans proportionate to their income. In theory, this could potentially help people lower their loan balance. What we're seeing is that folks who are trying to enroll in this new program are seeing their loan payments jump up, double, triple the amount that they had or should be paying, which causes all kinds of confusion and raises questions about why, why this way.
Well, I just want to jump in there because I hadn't heard your criticism about the lag time articulated in the way that you did, because on our show, we were very critical of his usage of the HEROES Act to cancel the debt, as opposed to doing it through the statutory authority that is given to the Department of Education under the Higher Education Act, which would just allow for the DOE to have the discretion to cancel debt broadly, right? But this is an issue with Democrats, and particularly establishment Democrats. I liken it to, in COVID, how we didn't expand Medicaid or Medicare, we expanded COBRA, even though that was more costly, more bureaucratic, and it's because we didn't want to let people know, hey, we could just do this and do Medicare. And it's like this. It's almost as if he made it so much more flimsy, both through the usage of the HEROES Act, but then also the means testing that you described, which came later and allowed for that lag time where lawsuits could be filed instead of just announcing the debt and then not having people apply, just canceling it writ large. And making it a jubilee as opposed to some sort of application process. That is almost, I think, even more important than what he used as the authority, because the Supreme Court, whatever, they're partisan and they don't really care. It's the fact that he gave these right-wing groups that opportunity through the means testing and the time that took to file these lawsuits.
Right. I think that I absolutely agree with you. It's, the fact of the matter is it was perfectly legal for Biden to cancel debt under the HEROES Act. The plan that he proposed was perfectly legal. It would also be perfectly legal if he had chose to use the Higher Education Act.
Right.
So what we're left with is not the major question on the table isn't which mechanism to use. It's how strategic is the plan to actually execute this, with how much conviction, with how much understanding that this is actually, we're in a kind of lawfare legal battle over this. And Biden has to be thinking a few steps down the road, preparing for the next challenges, because they will come. This is a contested ground. As soon as the president follows through on his proposal, it's really historic. The idea of canceling debt is shifting the bedrock of the foundation of our nation. It's a big deal. It's the level of the reaction from the right is proportionate to the ambition of the policy. I think Biden should be applauded for that. And he needs to have a strategy commensurate with the actual aim of this program, ready to win. Cancel the debt and then tell everybody that you've canceled it. And good luck to the politicians and the legal firms that try to claw that back from people.
Yeah. Right. Don't say like, hey, I'm coming to let's use a football analogy. Like, we're calling a pass play. It's a screen.
That's right.
Just be defense.
You might
be prepared.
Be in the left corner.
Yes, right, exactly. Don't do that, and just call the play. Try to run the offense. It's maddening.
It's exactly that. And the Debt Collective, I wrote a story last summer for the New Yorker about the fact that old folks over age 62 are the fastest growing demographic of student debtors. And I think that's an important, that story, it's still true that people are continuing to age into their debt faster than they're aging out of it. And the fact that any attempt to sort of slow walk cancellation just increases the number of people in the last third of their life who are still hanging on to this debt. But what I want to say is that in the process of writing the story about old folks with student debt, I encountered a 91-year-old woman who had borrowed $30,000 of loans in the 80s to go to law school. She was one of the first Black women to graduate from New York University Law School. When I spoke with her in 2022, she was 91. She had more than $300,000 of debt. This was a totally bizarre situation. I, for the process of reporting the story, spoke to folks at the Department of Education who confirmed to me, like, essentially, I think their analysis was, holy shit, we really effed this up. And they began a process of looking into how this woman's debt could be discharged. Long story short, they were able to discharge her debt, which was fantastic for Betty Ann, life-changing for Betty Ann, and also troublesome for her. She wondered, if they could do this now, why couldn't they have done this 10 years ago? And if they did this for me, what's the plan for the rest of the 43 million people? So the Debt Collective has been working for the past year to come up with a legal tool that is going to go live on Monday. That is you fill out a form, some basic information about your loan, and we on the back end generate a legal memo that gets sent to the Secretary of Education.
Wow.
So we know you have the power to cancel this debt. Go ahead and do it. So we're excited. I think we're really excited about this tool, and we're fully aware that this is not, the best way to cancel. The best way to cancel debt is to actually just cancel debt, not make people have to raise their hands one by one to petition for their debts to be canceled. But we'll use that power as long as we have to until the president gets it right.
Can you tell us more about that tool? That's very exciting, and I think some people in our audience might benefit from that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're building off of the legacy of some of the initial projects of the Debt Collective with students who attended for-profit colleges who were defrauded by their college, and there's our legal team discovered that there's a particular legal clause that allows borrowers who have been defrauded by their colleges to file for borrower defense to repayment, basically saying that if they were screwed over by their college, they don't have to pay back a scam loan. There's a more legally sophisticated analysis of that, but that was basically the program.
Right.
And at the Debt Collective, we similarly worked to build an online tool to help people fill out these forms calling for the exercise of this clause for their debt to be released. And we got tens of thousands of people to fill it out. And eventually the Obama administration at the time took up this tool as part of their own. And now it's part of the platform it's one of the tools that the Biden administration is now using to discharge debt, is this borrower defense tool. So, what started as this one by one people saying, hey, I know that the Department of Education has the power to discharge this debt, please do it, turned into over 7 years of debtors organizing, going on strike, making demand after demand, and standing together in solidarity, refusing to pay back these loans that they shouldn't have to pay. The Obama administration started a process. The Trump administration tried to stop it, and the Biden administration is again trying to make good on this promise to borrowers to discharge their loans. And what we see, works is when the loans get discharged, not by borrower at a time, but when they get discharged universally, automatically, altogether as a class. This is to disperse the debt. And that's the process that we're starting right now, not just for folks that attended for-profit loans, but for everybody who has a federal student loan. Go to the Debt Collective website. We're going to be having a big mass call about this on Tuesday evening to walk through. It's pretty simple, asks for basic information. How old are you? How long have you had your loan? My favorite question is how has this loan effed up your life?
Yeah.
And then on the back end, we generate some legal language that justifies why this loan is not serving this person, why they have the right to call for its cancellation. And then it sends a letter to the Secretary of Education and the Ombuds's office at the Department of Education. And for us at the Debt Collective, we hope that they listen to these letters. We also see these letters as a flag for people to hold as they walk into the street, marching and calling for full cancellation for everybody. So I think it's an important and necessary but insufficient step for what needs to happen.
No, it should not fall on people. Obviously, as you've said, can you talk about the importance of this as we come up closer to the dreaded dates in September and October, where interest is resuming on federal student loans September 1st, and then the payments are going to begin to start to be collected by the Department of Education in October?
That's right. So, this is a funny thing that the president has decided that the year that he's also running for re-election is going to turn on student loans. Well, he probably will run against the man Trump, who initially paused loans for people. We are wondering why.
That's a good point, and not one that I want to hear, but a good one, yes.
At this point, as Biden's decision to turn payments back on is, going to enshrine him as the debt collector in chief, we say at the Debt Collective. So this means that payments start, the loans turn back on September 1st, payments start coming due in October. For the first year that payments, there's what the Biden administration is calling an on-ramp. I think this is an attempt to soften the blow for payments, that in the first year of payments turning back on, the kinds of punishments that debtors ordinarily face for failing to make their payments, going into default or delinquency on their loan, will be paused. So it's more or less safe to not pay loans. At the Debt Collective, one of our organizing strategies is to encourage people, if they can safely manage to not pay loans, and to join what we call the debt strike, which is this collective refusal. We can't pay these loans, and we won't pay these loans. And this on-ramp year that we have is an opportunity for folks to join the debt strike without major, not paying loans can be a dangerous thing. Going into default is not something on your loans can really mess over your life, and it's not something we treat lightly. But if the Biden administration has made the dumb move to turn loans back on, but provided this sort of safety belt that goes with it of blocking default and delinquency, we're welcoming people to join the debt strike. And everybody who's even thinking about not paying on their loans should definitely be sure to fill out this petition to call for the administration to cancel their loans. We're calling it the Biden Better Have Our Money tool. And so that's, I think, going to be an important part of returning, as payment, borrowers won't forget that the president has the power to cancel student loans. That hasn't been taken away by the Supreme Court. It's a question now of how much conviction Biden's going to use to actually be bold and use that power.
It seemed like at least the Debt Collective did have his ear at some point in this process.
Yeah.
It was not enough. It was less than what Schumer and Warren were calling for, $50,000, but some debt he chose to cancel, even though he was using this, Byzantine application process, the means testing, all the garbage associated. But at this point, maybe you don't feel comfortable expanding on this, but I am curious what your take is. Do you feel that you still have that point of contact, of that ability to make your voice heard on this front? Because it seems like we're in a space where he's not, moving to the left on this.
That's right. I think it's an interesting question. I think I absolutely agree with you that Biden really didn't want to cancel debt. He did it with his gritting his teeth and practical.
He was the credit card senator.
That's right.
He believes in the disciplinary power of debt.
That's exactly right. So for him to make a move on this is he really had to come through a lot of his own work to try to pass this policy. So I think we congratulate him. We're happy that he took that first step. I think the fact that he, on June 30th, when the Supreme Court in the morning announced their decision that they were going to uphold the lawsuit, Nebraska v. Biden, that upheld the basically that blocked relief. That afternoon of that same day, Biden had a press conference saying that he was going to use the Higher Education Act to issue a Plan B. This is exactly what the Debt Collective had been, and others have been calling for, to say, use the Higher Education Act to cancel debt. We wish he had listened more closely when we said it's not so much which act you use, it's how you use it, and with the political savvy and strategy. Why that's not happening, I don't know. I wish the Debt Collective had, the authority to give him a talking to on what to do next. I don't know that I think it's a question of how strong we organize for it. I think we'll get the win that we organize for, which is why I really encourage folks to anybody who's interested in this and concerned about this and wants their debt or their kids' debt or their parents' debt released, should definitely join the Debt Collective, follow our Twitter, sign up for our emails, come to our meetings. I think that's going to be the way out of this. I don't have a ton of faith that Biden on his own has a great compass on this issue.
Well, I mean, really lastly here, it's Jeff Zients is now the chief of staff and not Ron Klain.
Right. Yep. And I think that, Ron Klain had been he was supportive of debt cancellation. That was a shift. I think I don't think that I don't really have, I can't give much comment. I don't have much awareness of what the internal factions in the White House for debt cancellation, but I would imagine there's lots of folks that are, this isn't their policy. They don't think this is, they have all kinds of misconceptions about who this benefits. The story, that really tried and true story that this debt cancellation is a handout for the rich elite really needs to be retired. The folks that have the most student debt are Black and brown women. They're poor folks. They're working class folks. 40% of people who have student debt didn't get the college degree to go with it. So any earnings that they would have their earnings haven't been boosted, although the debt has been assumed. So I don't doubt that there's folks in the White House who have some flat to bad understandings of what the problem actually is.
Yeah, well, and then we'll just be clear, that's just your speculation, and it was because I was speculating and I asked you to do so, totally fine. But Eleni Schirmer, thank you so much for your time today. Writer, organizer with the Debt Collective, and everybody be on the lookout for the Debt Collective's tool next week that could help you as, again, those dates approach with payments resuming. Thanks
Absolutely.
Thanks
so much for having me on. Take
care.
Of
course. Yeah. Great to chat with you.
Yes, you too. Bye.
Bye. All right, guys, with that, we're going to wrap up the first part of this program, the free part. But if you want to support this program, if you like what we do here, talking about the Democrats from a critical perspective, but one that's also constructive there. I mean, those were two, like, Biden should do this segments, right? 2 interviews, and I happen to agree with all of those.
Hey, what bad social outcome do you think might be linked to indebtedness?
Loneliness?
Yeah, surprise.
Oh, whoa. Well, join themajority.report.com if you want to support us over here doing this kind of work, bringing these voices to the forefront. Matt, what is happening on Left Reckoning? I mean, both Matt and I are very tired.
Yeah, I guess a couple nights ago we did Left Reckoning. I'm trying to remember.
You did
you Bronco Marchitich talking about
Squad.
And then this weekend for patreon.com/Left Reckoning members, Aaron Brown is going to be joining David and I to discuss the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx. So I don't know if he'll bring his soundboard or not, but it should be a fun reading of that classic.
What was the Fox host who said that the Communist Manifesto was written by Adolf Hitler in 1848? Oh, that guy, the haircut.
You got the year
Blonde
right.
guy. I know. No, Bill Hemmer. But it's because he meant to say Mein Kampf, but his brain put Communist Manifesto in the same vein.
But I'm saying, like, Mein Kampf was not written in 1848, but the manifesto was.
Right. Or maybe he meant to not say Hitler. Either way, in his brain he thinks Karl Marx and Hitler are equivalent in some way. So there you go. And on ESVN, we spoke at length about the Michael Orr updates. We also talked about the insane sexism in Spain as it relates to the Spanish women's team winning the World Cup. We also took some calls, and we had a bit of a breakdown of how we're feeling about certain NFL teams as we approach the regular season, which I cannot wait for. YouTube.com/ESVN show. Evil says, I was up with you too, and I'm dragging ass today. And then also, 10-Year Drug says, make sure you flag today's interview with Richard Wiles for best of. So I thought it was pretty good too. Dan for Columbus, interesting contrast that Richard says Exxon's climate scientists were actually all on point with their predictions. And one of the climate denier talking points Jordan Peterson uses is that climate scientists' predictions are always wrong. Yeah, they're not wrong at all. So much of what we're seeing and what we've been warned about, what we were warned about 15, 20 years ago in the public sphere, once climate change became more of a more understood in the public, was the outcomes that we're literally seeing this summer. So
it's just know-nothing reaction.
Yeah, right, exactly. Do we have Binder and Brandon? Okay, well, check out Scam Economy, check out Doomed, Leftist Mafia. They do that every Thursday night. I was on there a few weeks ago. Always a good time. And Brandon Show the Discourse as well. All right, guys. The number is 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey Sam, hey Andy, you guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
I think I might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.